Up and running. How are you, mate? You all right?
Yeah, good mate, good. Good to be back again.
It's been a while, hasn't it?
It certainly has, but I'm good. All good, thank you. You okay?
I think we've both said like to each other, definitely, and even a bit on Twitter and stuff, how we've both just subconsciously had a little bit of time away from
Yeah.
boxing. Wasn't really a conscious decision. I didn't think, oh, I'm gonna have a break or anything like that. It just sort of happened, and then been a while since we've produced anything really in terms of content, and it's only this week that in the sort of build up to Usyk and Joshua that I got a bit more involved and thought, oh, actually, like I'm really looking forward to this fight, and it was something that sort of got my attention, got my interest back. Dare I say?
No, exactly the same as you. I just, like you said, taking a bit of time away. Really, nothing deliberate, nothing like that. Just still were there. Taking over, but nothing of any substance. Dipping in and out here and there, but nothing sort of. Maybe boxing was sort of passing us by a bit. I don't know if that was just busyness and life or whatever, or maybe you know because of the sport itself. And it's, I don't know, could spend all day talking about that. But I was just sort of fell by the wayside a bit. But every so often we just sort of realise that, we're not too bad. We've still got a little platform here, and we're, maybe he's not quite ready to pack it in just yet. So here we are.
Until we lost all the followers earlier in the week, and I thought that was it. If Twitter's
Sunday
just
night
removed
meltdown.
11,000 followers, then sod that. But fortunately, I think
Yeah,
it
I
was
think
just
I think we both agreed there that if they didn't come back, then that was it.
I don't believe in fate or anything, but that was a sign if we'd been reduced to all of that. So
Was logging out for good then, like.
yeah, we'll see how that one goes. But I think yeah, like, it's interesting you again mentioned the sport, and it's gets to a point where it's quite tough to follow. And I mean, we joke about it and talk about more casual fans and all the world titles and all sorts going on and how to
Yeah,
pin down and understand exactly what's happening. But like for us too, it was well for me personally, it wasn't that. It was just the amount of it seems to be diluted with all the different platforms now. And I sort of sacked the zone off a few months ago. I looked at the
yeah,
upcoming schedule, and there were a few fights in there that I thought, well, actually, I would like to quite see. Like Mike McKinson went over and fought not Victor Ortiz, Virgil Ortiz, a bit of a different
yeah.
fight that one. And there's a couple of different bouts on different platforms that I thought, well, actually, but yeah, it's just I think it's done me a bit of good just having that little bit of time away and coming back with almost fresh eyes on it. And it was actually the Conor Ben and Eubank hype, and as casual as that sounds, that just got me
You know.
thinking, like, oh God, like as much of a circus act as it is, it's something I really I'm really interested in. And there's lots of factors that you think, oh, well, if this happens, then this could happen, and lots of questions that could be answered. And obviously, I think that was the case with Usyk Joshua, wasn't it? And the nearer it got, the more pulled in I felt myself, and the more I really wanted to know how it was going to go down and what was going to happen with it all.
Yeah, exactly. Another fine casual example there as well. Coming back out for the big fights. I know I was totally the same as you. It was passing us by. Honestly, man, I felt like I couldn't keep up. And like when I was in the house and I was watching it, I was tweeting through and stuff, but maybe it just wasn't at the forefront of my mind as it used to be. Like a lot of fight nights just totally passing us by. Whether that was Bill and Smith the other week, just oblivious to it, and I was like, I just had to give myself a shake. And even the Newcastle fight week the other week with Josh Kelly, it was just over my head. And it's not like us, do you know what I mean? I was used to half days, press conferences, weigh-ins, and really get stuck into that. It was used to be bread and butter, but I don't know. It was just like you say, maybe it's a bit too diluted and almost a bit too hard to keep up with at times. Like, what is this schedule? What is going on? It was just mad. But as you say, a bit of time away, come back with fresh eyes, fresh enthusiasm. And to be fair, there's some decent contests between now and the end of the year. So it is nice just to maybe refresh and recharge and come back. And I enjoyed the fight on Saturday just gone as well.
Yeah, so I might as well get onto that first and foremost, talk about the actual fight itself, and then we can maybe dive into what happened afterwards as well. But I think, like, from my point of view, it was going into it was sort of more leaning towards repeat than revenge.
So,
Um, I know a lot of people were thinking like Usyk potentially by stoppage, depending on his tactics. Looking towards looking back to the first fight, he had Joshua almost out on his feet by the end of the 12th round. And if you look at his strength, it's the speed, it's the work rate, the output, everything that in theory gives someone like Joshua problems. And it was a case of, well, now he's adapted. I didn't see many outside of the matchroom bubble and the DAZN bubble, and even Sky were a bit cynical with it, like picking Joshua or picking him convincingly. It was a case of, yes, he's a big, strong heavyweight. He could catch him. He could knock him out. He could definitely catch him early coming in. He needs to put it on him and needs to really almost go on like Chisora sort of tactics of bullying him and leaning on him and making it an ugly fight. And that's not really the Joshua way of doing things, is it? That's not his model. That's not what we know about him. And it sort of played out a bit like that. Obviously, there wasn't the stoppage, and it's interesting, I think, to see two heavyweights at the very peak of their powers, at the very top of the sport, not produce a single knockdown in 24 rounds. It just shows that it's not all about that one punch knockout power or the devastating finishes, and you can still have entertaining fights.
Yeah, totally agree. Honestly, it's hard to envisage Usyk being on the floor at this point. Just in any fight, I think he's so good. I mean, he's just a fighter from a different planet. And it was a Michael Benson the other day. God, to go down that, and a few people have done it, but just tweeted out his resume and it's from cruiserweight through till now, and where he's been and who he's beaten. You just think this is a once in a generation fighter. This is just outstanding. From a different planet of fighter, cut from a different cloth over there, aren't they? And he's just exceptional. He's got very, very few flaws, if any, really. He was, and I just couldn't see Joshua beating him. I just couldn't. I couldn't envisage it. And it was more repeats from me going into it as well. And he's just outstanding. Everything he does in there is he's just one step ahead in the mind and with the footwork and everything. He's an unbelievable fighter, and the right man won. And I don't want to go down the scorecard route again. I can't really be bothered with that, but Joshua didn't beat him, did he? Let's be honest. And even Joshua's best round, the ninth, Usyk was, as if he went back to his corner, and was like, well, if that's your best, I'll just go again and I'll go even further. Usyk's 10th round was incredible. Just such a brilliant fighter. And I pretty much is he unbeatable at this stage? There's one man, and it's going to come down to that, isn't it? Finally, we might get some sort of closure of who is the best heavyweight of this generation if they do fight. It's between the two of them, both elite heavyweights, and they are alone now at the top of the division. He's just brilliant, just class. And I think I tweeted something like that through the week today. Sorry, and I thought is it just a case that he's too good and he's got AJ's number, just like Fury had with Wilder? And I think it proved to be the case. I think they could fight another 10 times and he'd win them all, or he'd win 9 of them. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think we touched on what he brings to heavyweight, because you've discussed there what he did at cruiserweight, it's not to be sniffed at, but it's a big jump, isn't it? We talk about these heavyweights, what they are now, the size of the elite ones. Obviously, Fury's the height of them, the reach, the weight, all of these sorts of things. It was whether his skills were going to be enough. And he's not a small man by any means. He's given away a few inches in reach, a few inches in height to Joshua, but even that could make a difference up at that level. The weight difference between them is vast, to be honest. But it was, were his skills going to be enough to sort of cancel that out, any physical advantages that Joshua had? And yes, is the emphatic answer, as you say, over 2 fights, he's done the same thing essentially twice. He's outclassed him. I don't necessarily buy into AJ's tactics being solely to blame for the first fight. I think that was quite an easy defense for them to spin. I think it was quite an easy thing for them to sort of spin it off as, he tried to outbox Usyk, he tried to be patient and all the rest of it. I think that plays down a little bit of just how good Usyk is and just what he was able to do. I think he was the one who controlled the tempo of both fights. He forced Joshua to fight at a pace he wasn't comfortable with at times, not necessarily 100 mile an hour for 12 rounds, but apart from the 9th, as you say, I think that was definitely the round that Joshua won convincingly. The rest of them, there weren't too many you can make a really strong case for. I think, there's a few rounds in there that obviously Joshua got, and as you said, I'm not going to the scorecard controversy too much because we're both just sick of the back teeth of it. I think until the whole system is overhauled, we're going to continue to get these sort of these scorecards and the lack of accountability, these vague justifications of, oh well, I thought he landed the cleaner shots. Oh, I thought Joshua landed the cleaner shots. I thought Usyk did. I thought Usyk worked harder. I thought Joshua worked harder. It's just generic sort of blanket terms that basically mean that the judges can go without not necessarily punishment, but with, as I say, without accountability. The ninth, a brilliant round for Joshua, like his best of the two fights probably. But then you've already highlighted like Usyk came back. Had he had that round off, had he sort of eased off a little bit, or did he come out in the 10th and think, shit, I've given away a real big round there. I don't want him to get any more momentum and build any more confidence. I'm going to have to put it on him, and he did. I mean, the 9th, 10th, sorry, the 10th, 11th, and 12th, like he just coasted away on the cards, and it shouldn't have needed. He shouldn't have needed to be at that point for if the cards were accurate. But
yeah, no, that's true.
But he did it, and I mean, Joshua deserves a massive amount of credit, and I think there seems to be this absolute nature on social media of either Joshua was much improved, he was fantastic, he's he deserves everyone's respect, he is the reason that stadium fights have happened in this country, British boxing as a whole has to thank Anthony Joshua, blah blah blah, or absolutely shitting on him because he was unable to beat arguably the best pound for pound fighter on the planet. There has to be, and again, we always seem to do this and try and approach it in a balanced way, but there has to be some sort of middle ground there. You can't, like, it doesn't have to be one or the other. It doesn't have to be these extreme viewpoints. I think looking from my point of view, I think Joshua did well in both fights. If you put Usyk on this pedestal that I do, I think he's absolutely brilliant. He's shown that you don't need to be this 7-foot monster to be an effective heavyweight.
Mm-hmm.
But then, like, ultimately, did he really do enough to enhance his reputation necessarily? Like Joshua, I don't think he did. I think he's probably the number 3 heavyweight.
I agree.
He was essentially that going into the fight. He's made it competitive. It shouldn't have been a split decision. Like, there's no shame in losing a close fight to Usyk. Other fighters have done similar, you know what I mean? Like, I think the cruiserweight, like Michael Hunter, Maurice Bradis, they both were competitive, but ultimately lost on points. And I think that's what Usyk has the potential to do to a lot of fighters, maybe all bar one, as you said earlier.
I think just a couple of things that, just picking up on what you said there, basically agreeing with you. There's not much for us to disagree on this week. But I think the first one is that
I might, just for the sake of it,
most of the sensible voices that I see on boxing Twitter and the people that I respect and like to listen to, everyone, including yourself, we all agree that Usyk won. But I think you can acknowledge that Joshua was better in the second fight than he was in the first in terms of competitiveness and, actually landing a few shots and doing well. But that doesn't necessarily mean he won the fight. And I think that's what some people, lesser people, like more casual people maybe on Facebook and different social media things I've seen saying, oh, AJ was robbed. And you think, just because he was better in the second fight, than he was the first, didn't mean he won it, at all. And I think 99% of us can agree on that. And the second thing is just about Usyk. And it's funny because how perceptions change. I think going into the first Joshua fight, the jury was still pretty much out on him in terms of being a heavyweight. He fought Chisora, he beat Chisora, but there was still murmurs after that fight. Oh, he's too small. He wasn't great that night, and the question marks were still out on him. Can he, like you say, can he transition up to heavyweight from cruiser? And at the Chisora fight, he won it. He did box well. Don't get us wrong, but I don't think it answered every question. But I think now beating AJ twice, comfortably twice, is proved that he's a heavyweight. He might not have the knockout power and the punch power at heavyweight, but he can beat heavyweights, and I think he beats nearly all of them just by being Usyk. You know what I mean? He doesn't have to be he's a wrecking ball, a wrecking machine, whatever. So I think those questions are answered now, and I think like you say, Joshua is, which in a way is quite refreshing, but well, from a boxing fan's point of view, maybe his team's not, but he's a contender, and whether that's hard for people to accept, like you said, people always allude to those nights, your Klitschko's, Povetkin's, all them nights he had where he was like the man in this country. Fury was off the rails. Joshua sort of had the landscape to himself, really. Do you know what I mean? He beat Dillian White. He'd had them nights at Wembley. We don't want to get into all this again, but Matchroom and that did a pretty brilliant job with him, and he sort of stadium fights were his thing, and but now he's not, and it's quite exciting that he's still a big draw. Don't get us wrong, but Sam Jones put a list up the other day, and it's like if Joshua wants to end his career now with like 3 or 4 like shootout fights and mad fights, like go to China, fight Zhang, rematch Dillian White, like fight bloody Hergovich, and you think it's fucking fun. You know what I mean? That is just good fun. Like it reminds you of like the bloody 70s. Do you know what I mean? Like Muhammad Ali never went unbeaten, and all them fellas, like they just got on and fought again, and like he could have a mad end of his career, AJ, if he wants it, and he seems to want it from what I've been reading. It's like I think it's quite a refreshing place to be. Same as Wilder coming back. Do you know what I mean? He's going to have to
I think like we'll get on to, as I said, the post-fight fiasco, if you want to call it.
Yeah.
But like he's clearly a man that has been under immense pressure. Like you can look into the pros and cons of the hype he receives and the push he's had, and that has contributed hugely towards his success. Like Eddie Hearn, Frank Smith, Matchroom, they deserve massive amounts of credit. Like yes, he's turned pro with a gold medal from the Olympics, and there's big things expected of him, but like they've guided him absolutely perfectly through the domestic scene to world level, like filling the stadiums, all the things you've just highlighted there, and like ultimately, regardless of the hype and the cheerleading and all the attention that he gets, like he's done very well. He's partially unified the division. He lost an absolute massive upset to Ruiz. He avenged that in a fashion. He seems to some he seems to have changed his sort of his tactic, maybe a bit more reluctant, or a bit less willing to go in and throw punches, but he's never been that like it sounds daft, but like that overly aggressive gung ho fighter. Like he's obviously got power. He's obviously got the ability to stop people, and I dare say he found that easy to do coming through the ranks against some of the opponents he was put in with. Like they were designed to make him look good, to help generate that interest in him. And again, they've done that flawlessly in the build up. The Klitschko fight, an absolute war, both men down. He come through that, like Wembley, like that is the moment where it was just like, oh my god, like yeah, he's forget how old Klitschko was, what you think of that version. Like that was the performance. It's like right, he's got these belts now. Like obviously would have loved to have seen him go on and unify with Deontay Wilder, and like I'm not going to focus on all the negatives and what could have happened in fights that we could have seen. But now that trajectory is ended almost, he's not continually on that up. Even if he's plateaued at the level he has, if like Usyk's got his number, Fury's hovering around. Most I say would fancy Fury to beat Joshua. You predict that he'd go in as the favourite if they fought tomorrow.
Yeah.
Like maybe these other fun fights can be made a bit more easily. Like we've said for years, like the Dillian White rematch is always going to be there. Zhile Zhang, Big Bang, he's sort of put himself in the mix with a decent performance against Hergovich. Probably quite a lucrative option if Joshua wants to go on a bit of a world tour, go off and fight in China.
Yeah.
Not necessarily the risk there. Yeah, he's got a bit of power, but you'd favour AJ in that one. Like you mentioned, names like Hergovich. There's good fights in different markets for him, and I mean the fight I would love to see is the Wilder fight. That like they both lost since it should have been made. That should have been for all the marbles like several years ago. It hasn't happened. Whatever. The boxing landscape's moved on. It's changed. It doesn't change the fact that stylistically that would be a hell of an entertaining match for any fans watching. Like Wilder's always going to be dangerous. He's coming back out against Robert Kalenius this year. Like we'll see how he gets through that one. Joshua, it largely depends, and I think you might have said this already, like what he wants to do, because ultimately we can talk about these fun fights, but they're potentially the sort of fights that's going to knock the airs off your career. Like, if him and Wilder are in an absolute shootout, yeah, brilliant to watch,
Well,
but he's going to take a hell of a battering physically potentially in that one, or like one of them is
the
potentially both.
night.
Potentially both of them are. Same with the White rematch. Like as long as that lasts, they're both going to be in with a shot of landing that final knockout punch. And he's made a lot of money. He's won the belt. Does he want to sort of continue and reinvent himself as this non-world title fighter? I think I discussed in the build-up with someone saying like 12 or 13 fights in a row he's fought for world titles. Like he needs to accept, and the team around him need to accept that it's not the same model of AJ. Like I think personally, I think he's going to be as popular as ever. I think he'll still, with the right dance partner, him and Wilder, him and White could easily do a stadium without any belts on the line. Like we've said this before, there's no one in the business at the moment that can promote a fight like Matchroom can, and especially that whole event of it. Like maybe they have to pad the undercard a little bit more, a couple of decent fights on an undercard, and so like, he's still an act. Of course, he's still a headline act. Of course, he is.
Oh, absolutely, he is. He really is, and I can't see that changing until he retires. I don't even think, and I know we haven't come on to it yet, but I don't even think his outburst.
Well, let's come on to it. We've moved quite organically onto that, haven't we?
Yeah,
Because that I hinted at it earlier when I said like he's clearly a man under pressure, and my opinion on it was he's just basically got to the point where the pressure's on him, and I've seen various phrases: mental breakdown, he's cracked, he's lost it, all the rest of it. And however you word it, it's just semantics. Like he's obviously not happy. He's coming out of a 12-round fight, probably exhausted, and all the rest of it. But that to me is a sign that maybe he just needs to take a little bit of time away and speak
yeah.
with whoever he trusts and whoever is in his team, is in a circle, however you want to word it. Like there have to be some open and honest and quite frank discussions about what I said earlier. Like, is he willing to sort of make that drop down to accept where he is in the current heavyweight landscape?
So I was thinking about this just earlier. I think like I'm honestly surprised we sometimes don't see that a lot more often. Like I can't ever comment on it really, but we've been around boxing. Do you know what I mean? And like the emotions and the like chemicals and whatever flying around your body after a fight like that. Like I can't believe it doesn't happen more. It must be mad. Like even in football and other sports, like how you can just plonk someone straight in front of a camera or a microphone or whatever, and like you have to bang immediately compose yourself and just try and dilute all of that emotion. It's every so often it's going to spill, isn't it? And like remember Keegan 95, 96, whatever. That was another example of it. Just like my first. My first reaction to it on watching it live on Saturday night was probably the same as yours, and the other people in our WhatsApp chat was the cringe. It's like we're not used to it. We're like, oh, I'm dying! Like, please shut him up! Like, get the microphone off him, and like what I've seen, on Twitter, like High Field Boxing did what his sort of voiceover and his take on it, and like British people love analysis, and we love trying to find out a root cause and what's gone on, and it was
Yeah, Terry
it
hit
was
the nail on the
mad.
head with a lot of it there, and I think you did
I
as well in what you've just said about like whoever you're talking to there when you are saying, please take the microphone off him. Somebody step in and
yeah,
say, like, this is not the time, like, this is not the time and the place for you to be doing this. But see, again, like you've just said, British people, like, we analyze it, we read way too much into things, and I have got no experience or knowledge of the inner workings of Anthony Joshua's team. But to me, it looked like what many people sort of imagine goes on. Like he's got this massive entourage, and yet I think one of them tried to sort of put their arm around him and got shrugged
yeah.
off. And like Joshua said, he's an 18-stone unit, and it's got easier said than done, stopping him doing something he wants to do. But
Excuse me, can
you've
I have the
got to think
microphone? Yeah,
of all those people that are maybe not adding value to the camp, but
yeah.
taking something out of it. Just even if it's just being around Anthony Joshua and using that sort of as pull, like they all have a vested interest in keeping him sweet. And it looked like not one of them, his trainers, his coaches, his entourage, whoever you want to blame, not one of them had I want to say courage, but had the ability in that they could step up and he would listen to them and he would listen to them or any one of them telling him
Mm.
what he didn't want to hear. None of them did that, and that makes you question and sort of doubt whether that's happening at all. Like,
Well,
who is there to stop him? Who is there to tell him no?
that's a good point. Like you said, he's at that stage now where he is the boss of that team. Do you know what I mean? They're on his payroll, and like he selected those trainers. Would he have done that under Rob McCracken? He never has. Who knows? Do you know what I mean? Like
Is that partly why they've split?
someone who'd nurtured it, like brought him up through the GB system, and obviously was his pro trainer. Do you know what I mean? But I don't know. Like it was a funny one, and obviously Hearn is a master of PR and spin and stuff, and he straight away in his post-fight interview was sort of trying to rectify the situation, and I get it because it's what they've built, and the whole stay humble AJ and like poster boy and role model and stuff, which he has been over the years, but within boxing, and there's always been that thing of people can see through it, and he's not as maybe he's as clean cut as people make out, and the mask slipped probably for the first time in many years, and for some people, it was me included, it was quite refreshing, to be honest with you. It was because he's there, you know what I mean? Fury does it. We know what Fury is, but rough and ready, got a mouth on him. Every so often he'll slip up, but AJ never really has. But this time he sort of, the emotions got the best of him, and maybe the true AJ came out rather than stay humble, nice AJ. Do you know what I mean? Like boy next door, whatever. Like
Do you think that's
whether I think he'll have a detrimental effect on his career, absolutely not. I think it was brushed off the next day. He came out and addressed it on Twitter. The only person he probably really pissed off was Usyk and his team, because maybe he spoiled his moment.
What you want to do?
It was a bit too cringe, and I did feel a bit bad for Usyk in that. He showed amazing composure and mental strength to really keep his cool amongst all that, and he's came out of it looking good. But for no doubt, AJ fights again in November, which was the last thing I read today, and they seem to want to carry on. That it's still a massive draw, and he's still a huge draw in this country in terms of boxing, as you alluded to before. Whether himself and his team and Matchroom and Hearn can fully buy into contender AJ, free of the belts AJ, fun AJ, let's have some tear-ups, remains to be seen. Whether their egos and his ego can allow that is going to be fascinating. Or are they planning a way back to the top? Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm saying this like he's never going to win a world title again, and that's not the case. Like, he could easily do it. Whether he could beat Usyk for the belt, who knows? But if Usyk Fury is next, as we're sort of led to believe, like all those belts aren't going to stay around that one person's waist for long. We know Fury's flight A at best. Like, he could be off. Usyk has basically said he wants to fight Fury or no one. So if he wins that, then he's had 3 massive paydays. Does he want to go on defending one of the belts for the sake of it? Because we know how these sanctioning bodies work. The belts will get scattered. Whoever's the undisputed champion won't be for long. And again, Joshua is going to be as well positioned as anyone to pick up the pieces. Like, I'm not saying he sort of just outlasts Usyk and Fury and then unifies the division undisputed himself. Wouldn't rule it out necessarily, depending on who's available and what have you. But again, like, I think the whole AJ that we saw post fight on Saturday, it was, for want of a better word, it was raw. Like, we see this in lots of interviews and clickbait titles and things like raw interview, behind the honest, no holds bar, blah blah blah. Like, that's what that was, and it was a combination of what we've just said, that he's coming out of a 12-round fight. He's taking some big shots. He's exhausted. He's frustrated, disappointed, and I think it's just an absolute outpouring of all of those emotions of possibly like years of this sort of build up. I mean, the quote about, like, it's been memed and cropped and chopped and all the rest of it about him, like, not being a 14-stone heavyweight, so he can't throw punches in bunches. He's not going to be like a busy active heavyweight. He's 18 stone, and it was interesting that he obviously like did the little voice, didn't he, of like almost paraphrasing fans criticizing him. Oh, he's not throwing combinations like Rocky Marciano. Like that's what critics and fans
Yeah,
have said about him for years. In that he's big, he's muscle bound, he's not capable of fighting at that high pace. And if he does, he will gas like the next round or two. He will spend breathing
yeah,
heavily and trying to get himself that second wind. And yet, in the past, Matchroom and AJ and Sky commentary of oh, like, oh, you're just hating on him, like, you're criticizing him, he's won this, he's won that. And it's like, yeah, he has won all those things, but he is not that volume puncher. Like there's no getting around that. People could see that for themselves, yet they were almost sort of sheltered from it and trying to be conned around it. And like they're very, very defensive, and a lot of the DAZN and Matchroom people have come out very defensive after the weekend, like leaping to AJ's defense. And again, like he doesn't necessarily need defending from my point of view.
no, no,
He's
mate.
put an admirable effort in, and I think I think the whole rant, yeah, it'll be memed and it'll be people will go back to it and all the rest of it, but it'll be brushed under the carpet. People don't really care about that. You use Fury as an example. He contradicts himself every other week and still as popular as ever with his fans. AJ will still be popular with his fans and
Yeah.
all the rest of it. I think coming, it's interesting because I think coming through the ranks, if Joshua had been that outspoken, angry, aggressive fighter, would he have become as popular as he is? Is that partly down to this corporate clean image that he's had of getting the endorsement deals and making his money that way? Has that contributed and helped to him being what he is? I would, I'm
Aye.
answering my own question, but I would say, yeah, like, I think it has. I generally think that if he'd been, and if we're going to assume that like this is him, if he'd been himself, I do think there is an element of racism in the country that would have prevented him from being as popular as he is.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Like, if you look at other black fighters in particular, I'm thinking like Floyd Mayweather, his cocky, brash attitude. Yeah, he's a bit of a one of a kind, but like you look at Adrian Broner, Gervonta Davis to a certain extent in this
Yeah.
country, like Ahara Davis, nowhere near the level technically or in terms of success. But there's definitely an element of boxing fans and sort of people go even bigger, like a bit of a political rant, but like society and what have you, that would resent that.
Oh, yeah.
So I think they've played the game with AJ to a point, but maybe now, if he is just this open, angry, aggressive person, let him fucking run with it. If he gets in the fight with Dillian White, like let him go, no holds barred. Let him be as angry and aggressive as he wants in the build up and in the ring. And same with Wilder, like they would make entertaining fights for that sort of thing. And dare I say, down the line, if there is this Joshua Fury fight, just let him fucking go
Oh,
and it's not going to do him any harm at this point, I don't think, because he's made his money, he's done all of the things that
no,
he
no.
probably wanted to do. It's just like a bit more freedom, I suppose, from now and here on in.
It's just like you say though, they've created the brand, haven't they? Like his sponsor deals, Lucas did Under Armour, whatever. He's done the chat show circuits, Jonathan Ross and League of Their Own, and oh, funny AJ. He's always on the punch machine, and oh, everyone likes AJ. And, you know what I mean? What a lovely young man, and like that mask sort of did slip up. Like you said there, like we live in the age now of pretty heavily sanitized sports stars, and you know what I mean. And there's nothing worse than a footballer interview post game and just reading media trained footballers and sports stars just plodding out the same lines, whether you win, lose, or draw. And it's like sometimes you just need a bit of passion, and he did show that. You know what I mean? And I don't know. It doesn't affect him in the slightest, whether it affects his brands or whatever. But he is the brand these days. He's bigger than whatever Lucasade deal or whatever. You know what I mean? He's got his own sort of empire out there, and I think he'd be absolutely fine for it. Me, I think he was whatever controversy he's had in his career so far, and there hasn't been much, but there's been a couple of incidents. He's brushed it off. He's came back. He's maintained his fan base, and I think he'll be fine. But I just going on to the division. I've alluded to this a couple of times just on Twitter and stuff. Like I'm actually a fan of this current division, and I'm enjoying people sort of facing each other from it. Like you've got Usyk and Fury, right? Big two. They're your Man Cities and your Liverpools. They're ahead of everyone else, right? We
I'm
know
liking
that.
all these football analogies. You can tell Newcastle are doing well.
We know that by now, don't we? Do you know what I mean? Best two. But then underneath that, it's just much of a muchness. There's some cracking fun fights, which are being made, to be fair, like Joe Joyce Parker, do you know what I mean? Like Tony York fought Bacoli, like Wilder's on the comeback trail. You've got Dillian White, who's has no desire to hang out yet. AJ now joins this mix, and it's Hrgovic and Zhang got it on. It wasn't a classic by any means, but it was fun enough to watch with its own.
No, it was a fight I was interested in before it took place, definitely.
It's going to be interesting now just to see, because those guys need to keep moving below hand, and you're like, I know it's not going to be the best stylistically, but Hughie Fury, Michael Hunter, that's just been re-announced today, and you think it's good to see them guys below the top, not standing still, and actually fighting each other. What it leads to for them, they're all going to be jostling for positions and stuff, but there's some proper fun fights to make, and now AJ has joined that list of contenders, really, and it's going to be fun going forward, that division, I think. Just put them against each other, like to the credit they are doing with some of them, like we had Joyce and Dubois and stuff, and Dubois went over to America, and he's another name in the mix, and it's going to be good fun, like fun division.
I 100% agree. And again, I think the fact that a few of these fighters have losses on their record, it makes it that little bit easier. They're not as protected. They know that they're not, and I don't want to say it's marketable, because we talk about AJ is probably the most marketable fighter on the planet, but they know that they're not this perfect entity anymore. So it's like, right, if you want to make this big money, you've got to get in with someone decent. Like, you're not just going to have these knockover jobs. Like Dubois got to that point, took his loss against Joe Joyce, and has come back and wants to get in the mix. I know we're obviously talking about a Dillian White fight, which White himself sort of rubbish, saying he's not fighting 29th of October, whenever they'd announced that it was happening or there was a date or whatever. But yeah, like, it's a case of like getting on, and Joe Joyce has been matched quite well in his career. He's not, for the sort of prospect status he's been at, he was moved very, very quickly, so he's been put in with decent opposition. Like Bacoli's got a loss on his record against Hunter, who's now fighting Fury. Hughie Fury's got a couple of losses on his record because he's not been afraid to get in with the likes of Joe Parker, Pulev. Chisora's in that mix, still around them. Like, Jan is now lost against Hrgovic, so if he wants a second, you know what I mean? They're not biding their time trying to work their way through these rankings. It's almost a bottleneck at the top. There's a lot of decent fighters that need to eliminate each other before they're going to get those title shots. And as you said, all the belts are tied up at the moment with two fighters. So until they take care of each other, these other heavyweights can't afford to just sit around and wait for that to happen. They've got to try and stake their claim. Like, they want at least one or two good wins on their record to say, right, well, if these belts do come up, or whatever happens to them in the future, like, I want to be in that position, and it's only going to be a good thing. I mean, the Fury Hunter fight, when that got announced, I thought, you know what, like, that's a really good fight. I don't think, again, it's hard to say with any Hughie Fury fight that's going to be the most entertaining, but I'm going to put my head above the parapet here and say, like, I think Hughie Fury would be in a competitive fight. I'm not saying he beat all of them, with like any of the top 10. I think stylistically, he's very, very difficult to look good against. Sometimes that doesn't work in his favor because he's very, very difficult to look good, full stop. But like, for him, but if you put him in there, like, he's not your stereotypical big, strong, come forward banger. I think of the other names you've mentioned, if you put them in against each other, they're going to be fun. What we talked about earlier is like fun, entertaining fights, heavyweight shootouts. Joshua, White, Dubois, Joyce, Chisora, Wilder. They're not going to take many backward steps. Like, their strengths are coming forward and being on the front foot. So while they'll all be entertaining and probably guarantee more knockouts, knockdowns, etc., Fury is likely to go the 12 rounds, and there's not going to be a lot in between any of those rounds.
No, I know, it's mad. Like, as you say, you still got Joseph Parker, like, bloody, you obviously...
Him and Joyce, aren't they? They're fighting.
Frank Sanchez, you've got up and coming Americans, you've got a couple of Eastern Europeans that people rate highly, and it's like, I think for a lot of people that was maybe one of the first times actually watching Hrgovic at like a decent UK time on Saturday, and that was an iffy performance and question marks now over him. We were led to believe he was the heir apparent, and he's the next main man on the scene, and he's going to be this and this, and he'll smash Zhang, which hit my wallet on Saturday night, I tell you. But it wasn't. Yeah, he did. He really did. I haven't really seen any feedback since or any excuse. I don't know what the crack was, but he just didn't look good at all. And you've got people like him, and it's going to be interesting. It really is. And whether, like I said before, the ego of AJ and Hearn and all those guys, it's going to be the start of AJ's DAZN journey. Let's not forget that either. Do you know what I mean? Like you wouldn't think they made that big announcement last year. He'll see his career out on DAZN to never really fight on there in the UK. Do you know what I mean? Like he hasn't yet, so it's just like they're going to have to do something fun with him. But it's going to be interesting. I'd love to see him fight again this year, and I'd love it to be something. There's no point in him taking a massive step back now and fighting a pudding because he's been there and done it. He's not going to get any better, any sort of worse now. AJ, he is what he is. He might as well fight another contender and go for it, really.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we're saying, and there are enough of them.
Definitely, Otto Wallen, you know what I mean? There's names out there that he can beat, but that are familiar names. There's many of them. Like he could go on a Muhammad Ali style world tour, like finish his days off. No, well, hey, if he wants to, but the Zhang fight in China. Imagine that. I seen Rob Tebbett mention it the other day. And it was just
I'd heard that fight mentioned years ago. I think it was when Zhang first signed some sort of deal with Matchroom. It was like, all the cynics and all the haters coming out of the woodwork. They're going to send Joshua over to fight Zhang. It's like it's going to be an easy fight for him in China. Blah blah blah. And again, in massive disrespect to Zhang and underestimating what AJ was wanting to do and all the rest of it. But again, it just suddenly now appears to be like a fight that ticks a lot of boxes. It's like a very winnable fight for Joshua. Be very, very lucrative for him, I imagine. It's now that sort of fight that because he's not at the top of the division, he's not the belt holder, he's not the one with the big target on his back that everyone's aiming for. As I said earlier, the word freedom, he's got that freedom to do that, and he wouldn't necessarily get the pelters for it that he would have previously. Oh, what a shit defense that would be when Usyk's there, when Fury's there, Wilder's still there. There's not that pressure on him to be fighting the very best in the division, and he'll still, his personal pride might not agree with that. He might want to, you know what I mean? He might be sitting there now thinking he wants the trilogy with Usyk, and again, until he comes out and sort of announces his intentions, it's all going to be guesswork. But I think the takeaway from us is that there's a lot of attractive matchups out there for him, and he's not going to be this fighter that's past his sell-by date by any means. Those people, there will be people like Fury fans who will take great joy in this, and they will be hating on him and all the rest of it. But he's not done by any means. He's got, like you said, he's got a career at a very high level until he doesn't want it.
No, that's it. And, I think Eddie Hearn said it on post-fight, and he was like, I'm looking forward to seeing him free of the belts and sort of the pressure that relieves. And I was like, well, slightly, sounded a little hypocritical to me because, if you wanted him free of the belts, then you wouldn't have went anyway. You know what I mean? Everyone wants the belts.
It's like, I hadn't seen that, and I'm essentially on the same lines as Eddie there, so I can't really knock that.
No, but I'm also looking forward to it as well. I really am, and I'm really intrigued to see what's next. Honestly, I am. But good division going forward, to be honest with you. And I think I'm glad Wilder's continuing. I'm quite glad Dillian White's continuing. Although he probably needs a pretty big fight next because that effort against Fury wasn't particularly great, was it? But much of a muchness. He is what he is.
Again, going back to what you said right at the start, like Usyk has Joshua's number to an extent. It's the same with Fury and Wilder. Clearly, there's something there that whether it is just ability in Fury's case or a bit of psychology or what, but there's something that he's got over Wilder that, however many times they fight now, 9 times out of 10, you'd imagine Fury stops him.
Yeah, Absolutely.
And there's no shame in that. It's the equivalent, isn't it? There's no shame in losing to like 1 and 2 in the world.
No, there's really not. So I'm looking forward to seeing it progress and see what he does next. I think it's going to be interesting. He's in good hands. He always has been, and he really with Matchroom. I know it's
definitely so.
But he'll get the right guidance. I'm sure he will.
And I mean, we've talked about the heavyweight landscape, not sort of omitting the top two, but we do need to discuss them because yesterday it was announced that it was done or it was made in inverted commas. I think IFL had put a tweet out, except there were lots of different offers for the venue and the site and all the rest of it, and it was like, we've been here before with Fury and Joshua, like. It was done deal. It was going to happen. Apart from they needed to agree on a date, they needed to agree on a venue and a split and all the rest of it. And he's just like, how in what world is this done? And then I think very very quickly, IFL had deleted that tweet, put the same interview with Frank Warren up, but a completely different caption, about there were no problems that they could foresee or something like that. And it was just typical Frank, innit? Like an announcement of an announcement of an announcement.
That's it. Just before going on that, I feel a bit bad there talking about the sort of the heavyweight scene. And there's probably two guys we didn't really mention there, and they both fight each other, like 4th September. Andy Ruiz Jr. against Luis Ortiz. And you're like, well, there's another two to throw in the mix, like still knocking about, still trying to prove themselves. And that's a fun fight,
And again, that's... Again,
2 more names to throw in the mix.
It goes back to like 2 more names in the mix, 2 more fighters that have got losses on the records.
Yeah.
Like PBC were obviously at the point where they've got both of those in house, and there's no knockover jobs. It sort of harks back to Eddie's little catchphrase about his back garden fights, and there's no easy fights, and hopefully that is the case. And yeah, I mean, again, I'm talking purely from a fan point of view here. The fighters maybe not thinking that, but or the managers and what have you all thinking that, but they've got to get some value. The promoters have got to get some value on their shows, haven't they? So rather than having both of those in tune-up fights on the same show, put them in together. You've got a compelling main event there. Let them crack on. May the best man win, and then you go on to the next one.
That's it. Quick 10 minutes on Fury, Usyk, and everything that entails. I think that has to happen. I really want it to happen. That is 1 and 2, whichever way you want to put them. That is the best, as we mentioned earlier. Is the 2 genuinely elite heavyweights in the division right now. Like they have to fight to prove who's number 1. But it's what we say every so often with boxing, don't we? We always want to see 1 and 2 go at it, and every so often it happens, and it gets the buzz and it gets the respect it deserves. I really want them to do it. Fury's retirement nonsense. We've been around long enough. He, like you said earlier, contradicts himself every few days. It seems no one believes that for a second. I'm sure.
I absolutely love the bloke in the ring.
Love him.
I don't know why anyone gives him the time of day.
No, he does it. I think he does it out of boredom. He goes on all these talkings, around the country on his roadshow and that. And I honestly think he just does it to mess with people. Like the other week, where just so many contradictory stories about. He just makes them up as he goes on. It was, I had a pint in the hotel bar before I fought Wilder, and I was drinking 17 pints. It was just like, shut up, man. But I honestly think he must stand in front of that many cameras and do that many talkings where he just thinks, he's got the patter, that.
I'm going to get a bite.
I am just going to make something up here and just totally spin you off and see if you run with it. And 9 times out of 10 they do, and it's.
Everyone regurgitates. Yeah, I agree. I mean, what did he say? He wants 500 million or something. Then he would fight for free. And Simon Jordan had him on TalkSport and called him out about something because he was sort of slagging Usyk off. I think it might have even been this morning, as recently as that. Slagging Usyk off. Oh, no one knows him. He struggled with Chisora, blah blah blah. And then Simon Jordan was like, the other week you offered Chisora 2 million to fight. You can't be that bad if you're going to fight him. It's not the money type thing. You don't want that much money to fight Chisora, and so why Usyk? And it's just, as you say, one to the other. I
do believe he probably is coming towards the end because there's not much out there for him now, apart from Usyk. Because unless he loses a fight and then he accepts coming down and being contender Fury and all that, but he's beat Klitschko in his backyard. He's got Wilder's number. there's Usyk a bust now, and it's Fury a bust for Usyk, isn't it? Really, there's no one else you want to see any of them in with now. And I think they just have to fight, and I think
to an extent, yeah. I think, like, again, the boredom that you've discussed, I think that is a huge factor. Like, he wants that attention. Obviously, he knows that he can literally say a sentence and get millions of clicks and views on him and get that attention and stuff. But I think, like, the boxing is more important to him than he lets on, because we've, I'm not going to go back through history, but we know of the problems he's apparently had, and in and out of the ring in particular, and he's had that time away, and yeah, I'm not a psychologist, but he seems to be the sort of person that, like, really struggles just with his own time and his own thoughts. And when he's in camp, when he's boxing and he's focused and he's got, like, the world around him, he seems like a different person from like what you sort of see. Like, you know what I mean? He flips from one personality to the next, and that's part of his makeup. We know that now, but, like, I can see why he's sort of looking for that fight that would get him going. I think if Joshua had beaten Usyk, then we'd be very likely to be getting Fury and Joshua. But that's when the egos get involved. When, you've got Eddie and Frank trying to broker a deal, you've got Joshua and Fury trying to broker a deal, and there's more problems potentially with that one. But that might have been the fight that would have got him more motivated and more excited, and wet his mouth and his appetite a little more. I think with Usyk, it's a little bit more of a lose-lose situation. I think you get massive credit for beating Usyk, but a lot of people would just put that down to his size and his weight and the physical advantages that he's got.
True.
It's obviously less of a tantalising build-up. You've got Usyk not speaking a lot of English, even though he is a bit of a character. Would Fury be able to get in his head like he tends to do, and he sort of likes to do? I don't know. I think it's just a completely different setup and a different challenge for him. And I mean, it is the only viable one out there, isn't it? Like, say he has that and he beats Usyk. Like, does he then take the Joshua fight? Like, is Joshua and Team Joshua willing to concede that they're going in as a massive underdog, that they're not the big draw or the biggest draw of that fight? I don't know how that would work. And, like, obviously he's already beaten Dillian Whyte, like he's already beaten Wilder twice, 3 times essentially. You're then working your way through that sort of list of heavyweights that we've just been talking about. And do any of them have the pull financially or in terms of their reputation to draw Fury in to make him commit and keep going, or does he just continue because he loves the sport? And does he need that? Like, will he keep going until he's 40 odd? Like, again, like, second reference to Mayweather, but the amount of times he retired and then came back for winnable fights because it was presenting him with a chance to make tens of millions of dollars every time. Like, I really don't know. Like, trying to sort of second guess Tyson Fury and predict him is a bit of a fool's errand.
That's it. The only thing I can think of him is that he'll have a pretty nailed on media career. He could cross over Fury now. I think he's that popular. Do you know what I mean? I don't know.
Oh, definitely. I mean,
I don't just mean boxing pundit. Yeah, I mean the whole.
No, like 100%. He's already done the WWE, hasn't he? And
that's what I mean.
Coming on Netflix, he's done various bits.
I think just for me on Joshua, I think my stance has softened on that now. I think if I had to choose who I'd rather see Fury fight next, Joshua or Usyk, it would be Usyk all day, just because of the 1 and 2. As a boxing fan, you want to see 1v2, and I just think it was never about the Battle of Britain for me and all that. It was a nice sight, but it was because I consider them to be the first and second in the division at the time. Do you know what I mean? I think if he retires without that fight, but has beat Usyk or has fought Usyk, then so be it. It could just be classed as one that got away, I think. I think that fight is probably further away than ever at the minute and maybe has less public appeal. I don't know. Because it was a pick'em fight at one time. Do you know what I mean? It really was. It was, did you fancy, the boxing skills of Fury or the raw power of AJ? But actually, it hasn't transpired to be that way anymore. The perception around that fight now, I think, has changed. Hey, don't get us wrong, it sells out Wembley like that. It's massive, it's huge, it's but I just think it's maybe he's not as huge as it was 12, 18 months ago.
No, I agree, and it's the same with Joshua Wilder to a certain extent, isn't it? Like it's
Yeah.
what we're talking about. AJ, like he sells, he will still sell out stadiums with the right dance
Oh, God, yeah.
partner, and it's that landscape and the perception of these fighters. Like it's changed drastically over the last 5 years or so, even maybe less. But like it obviously depends on Usyk and Fury. I think legacy wise, I've got no idea how much Tyson Fury, like how much stock he puts into that, but I think not fighting Usyk now, and I think you've said similar, literally in that last sentence, like would have a more damaging impact on his legacy
Yeah.
than if he doesn't fight Joshua because of what Usyk's done to AJ. Like if he fights Usyk and beats him, then it's like, well, he's beat the man who beat the man, so you've got nothing really to prove by beating Joshua.
Yeah.
Like that's how I see like how history would look at it. If he beats him, if he beats Usyk, and then as I say, like puts that sort of voluntary defense to AJ, it could still happen. Fury would go in as an even bigger favorite than I think he currently would. Would the egos allow that of like Joshua and Hearn? Would they be happy playing that second fiddle, even though commercially they are still a big part of that fight? Like that's what I mean. It sells out. Is that still an attractive option, attractive enough option for him? Alternatively, if Usyk beats Fury, then there is literally nobody else for Usyk to beat. Like, yeah, again, he could defend the belt against other up and coming heavyweights, but does he need to do that? He's just beat the two best in the division. Like, does he then go off into the sunset, leaving the belt scattered? Do Fury and Joshua then sort of fight it out to be the best of the rest? Like, having both lost to Usyk, there's definitely still interesting dynamics and potential. It hinges on that 1 and 2 in the division, like unifying for the undisputed, and obviously what happens after that is going to depend on the outcome. Like, could we talk a
Yeah.
rematch? Like, would there be another rematch? Would rematch clauses be inserted? All the rest of it, like.
Then you've got guys like Joe Joyce jostling for position and mandatories and this and that, and it never stops, does it? Do you know what I mean? It never stops, and I think
No, it doesn't. And I think going back to the very start of this podcast, that's part of what like sort of turned me off it a little bit recently. I was just like, oh my God, like it's just the same as what it was like 5 years ago whenever we started
yeah.
this. Like you've got the next generation coming through, you've got this guy coming through, and you're just like, I've seen this all before. Like
Oh, I know,
I'm
I
at
know.
that point where we have been watching boxing for a long time, you get a little bit jaded by it.
100%. But I think it does you good to step away and, like we've always tried to do anyway when we're on the ball, is just concentrate on the fight, concentrate on the fights that are actually happening. And I think if you get bogged down with the hypotheticals and the what ifs of boxing, you'll send yourself mental. You know what I mean? Like it's a very hypothetical sport at times, isn't it? And you can just, a lot of bureaucracy and hearsay and what ifs. But there's, as I say, on the actual physically what is happening, there's some cracking stuff coming up between now and the end of the year.
I've got an example of both. Something that's apparently, well, it's partly definitely happening, and hypothetical. As we're on here, and I'm just checking Twitter, Michael Hunter's just put out 2 hours ago, I'm stopping Huey Fury and I'm coming for Dubois next. #bounty.
Interesting. Michael Hunter Dubois, I could get on board with that as well. Know what I mean?
That's right. Like, literally what we've just said there. Like, get them all calling each other out. Like, get them all in against each other. Travel to your opponent's backyard. Back yourself. Take that risk. Like, it's a massive cliche, but like, dare to be great. Like, take a punt on yourself against these other similarly level fighters.
But it's going to be fun going forward, and honestly, it's a decent. But even between now and like early October, you've got like Eubank Ben, you've got Canelo Golovkin 3, you've got bloody Savannah Marshall, Clarissa Shields. There's for once, there's pretty good, consistent boxing coming up. You know what I mean? Like we mentioned heavyweights before. You've got Makhmudov against Takam on Friday the 10th of September, and you're like, obviously Makhmudov's going to chill, and Takam's probably like 66. But again, it's then people sort of maneuvering and getting in position. Like it's going to be pretty entertaining, to be honest with you. There is some good stuff coming up between now and the end of the year. So fingers crossed it all plays out and we don't get any pull-outs and postponements, and because there's some belters coming up in the next few months.
Yeah, I was looking forward to it, and been good. I've enjoyed it. We'll
I
have to do it again sometime.
enjoyed the recap of last week's fight and the heavyweight division. It's been cracking. Once a week, that's a task. That's a test.
I think we can do a little midweek one. We'll keep going.
But yeah, of course we will. Okay, nice one.
Reinvigorated. I'll see you later.
Again.
Hi. More than fury.
Enjoyed it. Enjoy the match.
Hi.